Hi, I'm Carolyn.
And I'm Carol.
And I'm a high school drama teacher.
And I teach high school English.
And together we see lots of theater productions.
And we often get caught up in the drama of the drama.
Yes, we do. Well, just this last night we saw the Pennington Players production of Glengarry Glen by David Mamet. And
I thought it was excellent.
Well, first of all, that is one of my favorite plays. As a matter of fact, it's not something you can show in a high school classroom.
No.
So I have gotten permission before to show it because I think it's such an important piece to watch because of the language in Mamet and just relationships and character development. And it's just a great piece of theater.
I had never seen it on stage. I'd only ever seen the movie.
Right.
And I thought that the stage production was much better than what you see. I mean, the movie was good, and it had great actors. At Alec Baldwin.
And David Mamet, had a big hand in the production of the movie. And he wrote that monologue, which is not in the play, Alec Baldwin's monologue.
Right, for him.
For him.
Right. But, Al Pacino and all that. I mean, the actors are tremendous, but the intensity was there in the theater that you don't get.
Absolutely. There's actually a word, they call it Mamet speak for David Mamet's, dialogue.
Right.
And they call it Mamet speak. And it really is very fast, kind of street smart in that way. We always talk about, you can be smart, book smart or street smart. Which one is better, I don't know.
Well, my son, he's a genius.
Right.
Dumb as hell.
Right. Not very smart.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Well,
okay.
He is smart. He's not street smart.
Dumb as hell.
No, street smart.
Okay.
So.
All right.
So, my sons are very smart. And street smart, as a matter of fact. So, anyway, that's one of the things that I love about Mamet. And the other thing, as a theater person, that I like about him is it's this kind of rapid fire dialogue that takes place.
You and I talk about, you know that The West Wing is my all-time absolute favorite television show. That it's, I still pull it out and we'll watch episodes.
Aaron Sorkin has a way of it's in the writing. He does that
same kind of thing.
But with Mamet, so his other big show, but other big plays. American Buffalo is another piece that I really like. Can't really do it with high school students, but I really like that piece. Speed the Plow, right?
That Madonna was in, by the way.
Right. Sexual Perversities in Chicago, which I have used with my kids in scene work. You can actually find pieces of it you can give to the high school students, which is great because it's about the rhythm of the words. It's almost like poetry in many ways, the way he composes dialogue. And so I think that's what makes him so interesting to watch is that dialogue. And what I want to say is this cast was phenomenal.
They were phenomenal.
Like this show needs to find that rhythm. They need to find that that pace within the language, and they all did it so well.
And what I realized is as I was watching the show, and we'll talk about the actors because I thought they were all very good. Like there was not a weak link in that cast.
Absolutely not. Because you can't have a weak link in this kind of play.
No,
you can't.
Right. But what struck me was the symbolic nature that the language took on. So, and as we talk about it, we'll go into more detail, but the men who used the language the best were successful. The men who didn't use language well, who stuttered, who couldn't, who repeated themselves over and over, who got hung up on words, which was in the script. It wasn't a flaw in the actor.
No, it was in the script.
It was in the script, and they stuck to the script, and that was the way it was written. Were not successful, and the whole premise of the show as they were starting the opening, I couldn't help but think about, Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman, right? Here are these salesmen who are trying to define what success is, right? And success is getting your name up on the board, right? If you get the top sales, your name is on the board. If you get the top sales, you win a Cadillac, right? And that's how they define success. But reality is none of them are very successful. As they keep saying over and over, the leads are dead, the leads have dried up. The one character, Ricky Roma, he's at the top, but then he loses a sale. And it's really about these men who... He
loses, he does lose the sale.
Right.
But he loses the sale because of somebody else's mistake.
Right, or the robbery in the place. But, it's about these men who are trying to become... successful as we define successful. And I want to talk about this later too. It's what I call that Roman soliloquy, right? Where he has that moment in the bar or the restaurant. And they are, none of them are successful. You hear about a little bit about some of their lives outside of work. None of them are, they're all alone. They're that true Willie Loman kind of, American, looking for the American dream, failing at the American dream, right? And I thought that was all done through Mamet's use of the language, right?
Right.
And how he created it for each character.
he uses words as weapons. So, and that's part of that very quick, rapid fire. I'm going to beat you down effect that he has, especially with the character of James Link, who was played by Daniel Gleason. I have to tell you, he was phenomenal. And if we're going to talk about that, we have to talk about the director's blocking of the scene. So I thought it was well staged. I thought it was really well staged. There was a moment where he's leaving, right? And the door is upstage right. And he's leaving because his wife has told him he's supposed to get a check. And now he finds out that the check was cashed. That check was cashed. And but it really wasn't. But he's standing there and everybody else is facing upstage. So you are focused on him. That's really good. That was really good blocking. But he just... with the stuttering and the focus on basically having a breakdown on stage,
that
was so intense. I mean, it's not a big part. He's not part of this, boys' club within this real estate agency, but he was really phenomenal.
And it goes back to what what I was talking about with the use of language as symbolism. So each one of these men at some point ask the question or make some comment, I'm a man, you're not a man, what does it mean to be a man? And clearly out of all of them, if you're talking about manhood in our traditional understanding of what manhood was or is, right? He is the least manly of all of them. His wife tells him what to do. His wife tells him he's got to get the check back. There's a time when Roma says to him, you can't negotiate. You can negotiate this yourself, or you can't negotiate. And he's like, no, my wife told me this is what I have to do. And that first, up until that end scene, he doesn't even speak at all. He doesn't have any language at all, and all of his action is through his face and his body. And it's not at the end until he's defeated, right? And he is defeated. That as he's walking out of the door, he turns and he looks at Ricky Roma and he says, I'm sorry I let you down. And then that moment,
that's the moment.
That's the moment where you feel that he is not a man. Right? And that's what he's apologizing for. I'm sorry I let you down. I'm sorry I'm not man enough.
So we should talk about just the language in meaning the bad words that we don't. This is not a family show.
No.
At all.
No.
But on that note, but that's important to the play, is that he kind of creates this this use of language and it's I don't know how to explain what I mean when you hear these words, they are again the way the characters use them as weapons.
Well, and it's very,
which I said before.
You know,
but.
it's very locker roomish.
Yes,
right.
But it's to the extreme. Do you know what I mean? I think it's really to the extreme where there's somewhat overuse, especially
when was
with
the play
Roma.
written originally?
In the 80s.
So maybe as time has progressed, we've gotten a little more desensitized to that.
I don't know.
And it doesn't seem to be as harsh.
Mamet tends to do this. It's American Buffalo's same way. So it's part of the way, that Mamet speak they talk about. And I know that he dedicated the show to Harold Pinter, who I love and studied in school and wrote a show that I directed, The Dumbwaiter. And it's the same kind of thing. These two guys, and they're waiting, and this very kind of quick dialogue, repetition. He uses repetition all the time.
Right.
And so that's really important. I mean, if we're going to talk, we should talk about Brian Jason Kelly, who played Ricky Roma.
He was phenomenal.
And Rick Purcell, who played Shelley, and he was great. But I also really, really liked Williamson, Andrew Timms, who, finally at that moment when you think Ricky Roma's going to just nail him to the wall and he turns it on him.
Well, and again, there's this conversation, and Ricky Roma was my favorite character.
Right.
All right. I mean, you don't like him all the time.
And you got to give the actor credit.
Yeah.
A lot of people will go in there and they'll be like, that's Al Pacino's role.
Right.
That's the way you remember things.
I never thought that.
No.
I never, that whole time,
No.
I never, and for me, like, there's this, he calls, and again, it goes back to this whole idea of manhood. Like, I keep thinking, if I were writing a paper, that's what my paper would be on, right? This idea is, how do you find manhood based on this play, right? How is Mamet questioning and defining manhood? And he looks at Williamson, and he says, you were just a child.
Yes, he does.
Right? And at that moment, like, out of all of the curses and all of the bad words that he's been calling everybody through the whole show, that is the worst insult that he gives to anybody, is when he looks at him and says, you're a child. You don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Right? And so it sort of diminishes who he is in that moment.
Right. It's funny because I had a conversation with a student that I saw this play, and he's very well educated in film and theater, and he said to me, "Oh, that's the one you're always closing. You always need to be closing." And I said, "Yes, that's the play, you know." And that's really important. You're always closing, right? So it's this game that they play because, it's a pyramid scheme. They're shysters and it's about corruption. And so the other person I want to talk about is the guy who played Moss, Mark Violi, who has that big piece at the beginning, the big sort of monologue where he's sitting there with Arano, right?
Yeah.
Who was Sheldon Bruceff. And he just was on the mark. His timing was perfect. Delivery was perfect. Everything about it between the two of them, like, you just sat there and you felt like you're not watching a play. You're watching these two guys in a restaurant having a real conversation about, robbing their business. And the other idea too is they get sort of caught up in this drama of the drama, right? Yes,
right.
Like we do.
Mm-hmm. Like, they get caught up in, are they going to steal the leads and getting the leads, and they're bad leads, and what the reality is, the leads aren't going to matter, right? It doesn't matter. Shelley sells to this couple, and he finds out later that they can't cash the check because they're both,
there's no money.
There's no money, and they're crazy. And Roma he closes this deal with Link, and then it falls through, and everything it's like this comedy of errors that keep happening, and they steal the leads, and then they get caught stealing the leads.
And that's another thing. Like, he uses a lot of language that may not be familiar to people if you don't understand that kind of business, but
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No,
because
it
you
doesn't
don't.
matter.
That's not the importance of the story.
Right.
You know, that's not the story.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I do want to go back, because for me, the best moment in the play is, and I think, I can't remember if it's like the beginning of Act 2 or Scene 2 or Scene 3. I think it's the beginning of Scene 3. And Ricky Rome is sitting at a table over here, and Link is sitting at a table over here in this restaurant, right? And they're not together, but Roma is having this conversation, and it reminded me of this Shakespearean soliloquy, right? We're hearing his inner thoughts. Now you realize later he's
setting him up.
He's wooing in Link to set him up to sell to him. But he sort of talks about, you know, what is life? And it was like this sort of existential moment where I thought it was like existentialism meets Willy Loman in the middle. And he says, well, what is life? You know, life is sometimes you're looking forward, sometimes you're looking back, and none of it matters. If you're a bad person, it doesn't matter. If you know, lie to people, it doesn't matter. In the end, you know, either you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you're doing right here in this moment. And it was when he was delivering that and sitting in that chair, it kind of, it just pulls you in. He was talking to this guy sitting over here, but he was talking to each person sitting in that audience, right? Like he was having this conversation with you in the moment, and you come away from there thinking, he's right. None of this stuff matters. If you sell, if you don't sell, if you buy, if you don't buy. In the end, none of it matters. And he even says, you know, you're not taking any of it with you.
Right.
Right? And that like at that moment, as far as I was concerned, it was done.
I think that like we both really liked the play, and we both really liked the performances, because that's what sold the play.
Right.
Was their interaction. So just a couple things we really should talk about. Number one, set was great, right?
Yeah.
Set up the office nicely, very much in period, you know, with the way it was set up. Blocking was really, I thought, very, very clean. And
you know that as long as they aren't running into each other, though, I'm good with it.
I know, but for me, I thought it was just really, he made very interesting pictures. That's what I like to see when I'm watching a play. Costuming, you know, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, they're sales guys who don't, you know.
Right.
You know, I always heard that, like, my brother told me this, businessmen, you're not supposed to wear short sleeve dress shirts. That's not like professional. Those kind of things. You know, these are.
Were we talking about somebody we work with today that always does that? Was that the conversation I was having? I was having this conversation with somebody I work with today.
But that's
about a man in our building who wears the ties and the shirt sleeves, and they're going to buy him a pocket protector to go with it.
Right, because that's a teacher. That's a look of a teacher. You're right. So, but. We didn't talk about the one thing that is a director's choice. And the director's, Kyrus Wescott, made a choice to put a woman in the role of the detective, Gina Rose Hermans. And when I first sort of saw publicity about this, I saw her in the picture and I thought, you got a lady in the show? Yeah. How's that going to work for me?
Yeah.
So I think it worked.
It did. It was a little off-putting at times.
Yes.
Because, you know, and we had the opportunity to talk to the director.
Right.
And he said he had to get permission to do it, and they couldn't change the pronouns or the way they referred to her.
Right.
So she is referred to as guy and fellow and he and you know, and that was a little off-putting at first for me. But then it kind of I got used to it, and I was sort of in this mindset of this sort of androgyny of this character, and would I've liked for them to call her she? Yes, I would have.
I wish that they could have done that, because it would have made it so much more interesting.
Correct.
Because it's clearly the kids today. It's in class when I was telling them about this, because I always share, this is one of my favorite plays. They were like, so we're doing Newsies, and they said, are you going to dress girls up as guys? And they asked me, was she dressed up like a man? Was she supposed to be a man? And I said, she was dressed
Like a detective.
Like a detective.
Yeah.
She was not. She was a woman to me.
Yeah.
On stage, she was a woman.
Yeah.
I didn't see her trying to portray a man.
No.
Which I think would have been a bad choice, which I'm glad he didn't do. So I thought that was...
yeah, but I just, you know, I mean, she comes in and she's sort of running the show.
She is running the show.
And you know, she's looking for whoever broke into the office, and she's the one who is, you know, calling them in, and ultimately comes out and says, you know, it's your turn now, get in here now. I mean, she's not doing it in a very feminine way, whatever that means. But you know, I thought that it was sort of in this understanding of what it means to be a man, and this concept of the play, this also sort of question of, then what is our social construct of what it means to be a woman, right? And we have these expectations that women are supposed to be a certain way, and she wasn't.
No.
Right? And so was it inappropriate for them to call her guy and fella and he, right? You know, and I think, you know, kids are much better sort of with this whole gender fluid
I agree with
understanding of pronouns and how we use pronouns and all of that. So, you know, I think in the original, our original reaction was a reaction that is typical of our generation.
Yes.
We are, you know, I had a conversation with my niece this week about gender fluid. What does it mean? And, you know, she's got a friend who's gender fluid, and some days she's a she and some days she's a he. And the kids just say, oh, you know, you know, they just go with it.
You're very right with that.
You
and
know?
I mean, I think it was an interesting choice to make.
Yeah.
I liked that he took a risk like that. That's a risk, and I liked it. So I just overwhelmingly loved this production.
Yeah. And I do want to give a shout out to this director, and the reason I do is, you know, Kyrus Wescott. He's young, you know. In fact, we found out he went to college with
some of our students,
right? So he's about 25, 26 years old, and in the program, a couple of the actors give really nice shout outs to him about how he guided them on this journey and all. And what I kept thinking was, here's this young man working with these very seasoned, when you see their resumes of these actors, they're very impressive. So these very seasoned actors who could have come in and sort of, I'm sure it took some negotiation and navigation, and he did a great job. And the fact that they gave him these shout outs in the program and gave him that respect, I think that says a lot for him as a young man.
I agree. And I have to tell you, for a community theater production, this was, I would not have known it was a community theater production. I would not have expected this, that it was that good. You know, and I've seen this play a couple times. So I was very impressed. A shout out to the cast and everyone involved in the Pennington Players production of Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah, I would say you know, it's definitely worth the time to go see that show.
Go see it. And we have to give a shout out to Greensleeves from Flemington for our fantastic
cupcakes.
Cupcakes.
Can I eat them now?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
So until next time, break a leg. I'm going to try.
I want the carrot cake.
Okay,
I love carrot cake.
Well, I'm going to have a piece of your carrot cake.